There's something odd going on in the comic book shill media sites. Specifically, CBR is starting to make sense every once in a while. We talked about they kind of ran down some problems with Marvel. While I didn't agree with all of them, and Doc certainly didn't either, they were making a little bit of sense, like they were actually starting to notice the problems in comic books. And recently, they had a top 10 comic writing tropes destroying the industry. And I must say, Doc, they were pretty spot on.
It sounds like they just listed the top 10 things that we've been bitching about for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years.
I don't bitch, Doc. I opine.
Well, okay, fine. I bitch. You opine. You do it all smart like. I'm just a lowbrow clown. So, yeah, okay, fine. We'll go with that.
Yeah, it was shocking. They actually made a little bit of sense here. So we're going to run them down and talk about how these things are absolutely destroying comic books. Coming in at number 10 was some comic books are clearly written to be TV shows and movies. This is the 30 Days of Night effect, where a guy had a screenplay, kind of converted it into a comic book. It ended up being really successful. And then the movie came out and stuff. Obviously, there's a lot of comic book content being transitioned over to Netflix and stuff like that. And it feels like it's gone the other way now, where people are trying to write their comic books to become Netflix shows.
Yeah, it is that same 30 Days of Night effect. It's also the Mark Millar effect, where now he's creating stuff as comics to be immediately transitioned to or adapted into TV shows, or he's coming up with TV show ideas.
He's coming up with TV shows and he's adapting comics based on that. But he's a comic writer, so he actually makes them like good comics.
Exactly. You can really see with how they're drawing comics, how they're laying them out, the scenery and everything.
They're storyboards.
Yeah, they are nothing but storyboards shrunk down into panel size and then put in order, because everything is written and drawn with the idea of a budget in mind. And that's so that way you're already getting a taste of what the budget for the TV show or short or, film series will be about.
But you lose all the advantages that you get with making a comic book, i.e. you have no budget. The only limit is your imagination and what you can illustrate.
Exactly. Imagination has no budget. And you see, and it's also started impacting the superhero genre, because even they're taking into consideration what the set design costs for filming this exact scene will be, instead of it being some crazy, atmosphere or environment that they're in. Now it's a coffee shop or a random alley in New York that you can film for, pennies on the dollar. And it just really diminishes the overall massive scale that you can do comic books in, and artificially limits its, the medium's potential impact.
Coming at number 9, they said decompression is okay, but comic readers still like shorter arcs. I don't mind a little bit of a decompressed story. It's okay sometimes, especially when it's well done. Like James Tynan's Something is Killing the Children, I would consider that decompressed storytelling, but it was pretty good because you were being invited into a new world and stuff like that. But everything is decompressed now. They're not even like 4-issue story arcs anymore. I think it took Tom Taylor 15 issues for Superman to defeat one enemy in his comic book. It has gotten really ridiculous, and it's so boring now. If you want to write decompressed stories, write miniseries, write graphic novels or whatever. If you're going to be doing ongoing, periodic, floppy comic books, you need to actually have some resolution every single issue.
Absolutely. It's just so boring at this point. So much of the material is filler. They went to the right for the trade, and everything ended up being six issue stories for each arc. Look, not every story arc has enough meat for 6 issues. I understand that it's better for, the secondary market with the trade market and everything like that, and that's how business is done these days. But you can mix up a couple of 1, 2, and 3 issue story arcs and still make it 6 issues and still matter. And then the fact that they're now just writing for the omnibus instead of even the trade has made some of these stories that really, okay, maybe they were 1 issue worth, now they're 6 issues, but a 3-issue story back in the day is now 14 issues. It's just really tedious, and it's there's so much filler in there. The meat isn't there to make it that long. So it's just, again, diminishing the overall effectiveness of the medium.
Number 8, they said the comic industry has seen its genres wilted away. You know what? I think when they announced the New 52 and launched it, there were actually comic books in there that weren't superhero comics. They actually used to do genres at DC Comics, certainly when they had Vertigo and stuff like this. Marvel and DC really don't do anything outside of superheroes anymore. Maybe a fantasy comic book here and there, and you really have to go to the indie scene, and a lot of times those are with the really smaller publishers. There's a lot of good horror stuff out right now, but there are no war comics. There's no real romance comics or anything like that. So
this is the only one on this list that I didn't entirely agree with, because even at the height of superhero comics popularity, the overall number of genres, the whittled away quantity of genres had already vanished. Look, there hasn't been real genre. I think right now, in reality, there's more genre availability on the market at the local comic shop on a weekly basis than there's been in probably 45 to 50 years.
But it's all tiny publishers. Not every
it really is.
Yeah. It's not going to have most of them.
Exactly. And the big two, they are who they are. They are superhero publishing lines. Now, DC has more of a history in doing horror and fantasy and crime and war comics than Marvel does. The last time Marvel had real genre variation was when they were still Timely Comics, or even before that at Atlas. So again, I think that there's a lot of genre availability. They are coming from the small publishers though. So I don't entirely agree with this one, but again,
if you go to European comics, it's almost none of it is superhero comics. It's all kind of fantasy and stuff like that.
And if you go to manga, there's very little superhero. They have fucking everything there. So I think that there is infinite amount of genres that you could look for these days. So I don't entirely agree with this one.
If you know where to look, you can definitely find it. Number 7, the shrinkage of the ongoing books leaves little to invest in. That is 100% true. Almost everything, even when it's announced as ongoing from Marvel these days, is inevitably a mini-series, and if you're lucky, maybe a maxi series. It's already decompressed anyway. You'd be lucky to get through a single story before a Captain Britain comic book gets canceled these days, and there isn't a whole lot to invest in.
This is the kind of diminishing returns of Marvel and DC's publishing strategies over the last decade, where they've just had to go to the well more and more and more frequently to get those the bump from a new number 1 and the first couple issues. This is the inevitable end result of it. Now they've whittled down their they've driven away so much of their audience, because every jumping on point with a new number 1 is also a jumping off point for the existing reader. More people are dropping off than are sticking around. And honestly, I don't know if they have a big enough audience to have ongoings, but they've also tried the copying TV's season model. Yeah, which seasons on TV exist because there is limitations to the real world of actors' schedules, them wanting to do other projects, budgetary things, having to go back and have a chance to, so that the networks can reevaluate the entire season to decide whether to continue it and renew it for another season. Those are all limitations that exist in the real world that comics don't have, yet they have artificially saddled themselves with. And there's a reason why TV shows get maybe 4 or 5 seasons. If they're really, really good, 6 or 7. If they're phenomenal, 10 season. And then you have your obscure like Cheers, MASH, The Simpsons, and Family Guy, and South Park, that just are a world unto their own themselves. But every other show gets canceled, and then it goes away forever unless it gets rebooted. Whereas comics, there's a reason why they were going for 50, 60 years uninterrupted before they got rebooted, because they had a sales model that didn't allow people to drop off. The TV reboot model gives people the opportunity to leave. And when customers have the option presented to them, hey, is this a time to leave? They oftentimes take it.
Coming in at number 6, the multiverse is fun, but there can be too much of a good thing. I'll tell you right now, I don't find the multiverse at Marvel or DC fun anymore. Especially at DC Comics. They've made it so complicated and so big, and it feels like a catch-all excuse for all their stupid stories. Well, guess what? If everything's important, if everything's in continuity, if everything is really happening at the same time, and every decision is I don't even want to get into hyper time and all that stuff. It makes everything feel less important, and I'm tired of duplicates of characters and reading it, and you're like, oh, this must be in another multiverse. Like, this is getting old.
It's just been an excuse to do what-if storytelling inside the main universe and somehow have it matter, even though it still exists in an alternate universe. They happen every week. So instead of you getting a little glimpse into one tiny, other universe with some deviation periodically, that's the only taste of it you ever get, and then you get to see a different one. Now they're constantly revisiting them. They're constantly interacting with them. It just loses all of its impact. Honestly, does your main universe even matter at this point? Because it's constantly involved with all these 47,000 other universes, it diminishes the interest in the main universe. It just allows them to play incredibly fast and loose with IP, with characters, with storylines, and nothing really seems to matter as a result of it. And instead of it being a little treat every once in a while, it's like eating, candy for dinner all the time. It loses all of its, impact very, very quickly if all you're getting is dessert.
Absolutely. Coming in at number 5, it's time to admit superhero families are too big. I would say this is more of a DC problem, but it's also creeped over to Marvel Comics as well. There are too many Green Lanterns, specifically human Green Lanterns. There are too many Flash characters. There are too many Superman characters now. There are even too many Batman characters. There's far too many Robin characters. How many Captain Americas do Marvel Comics have now after the United States of Captain America last year? Like, it's getting ridiculous, Doc. It takes away the special factor from the heroes where there's a duplicate, triplicate, quadruplicate of every single character, and there's in some cases like 10 to 15 versions of that character running around with different names. The Flash isn't special because he has speed, because so many other characters have the exact same traits now.
I've been screaming about this for a decade.
But I like legacy characters.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing is, there's a reason why I don't like legacy characters, because once you open the door to this, there is no stopping it. It becomes an onslaught of never ending, reskins of the exact same character. All of your IP, your uniqueness goes away. You have nothing but brand dilution. And if everybody can be Spider-Man, there is no Spider-Man. If you got 50 people that can run fast, there's no Flash. There's no uniqueness to that character. I've been screaming about it for years, but see, they'll never stop doing it because everybody keeps screaming, well, I need my Spider-Man. And every one Miles Morales that gets moderately successful, but even then, still not all that successful, and still can't even hold Peter Parker's jock strap. There's going to be 500 Silks and, Aranas and all of the other spider people that get thrown in there, and Spider Gwens. And then once you open the door to that, you end up with ripoffs of the ripoff characters, and it becomes a never-ending spiral down into brand blobulousness. There's no form or consistency to what something means when you say Spider-Man or Superman or Batman. You have an image in your head of exactly what that thing is, and that is the thing that companies spend billions of dollars to try to create in the automotive industry or the tech industry. And the superhero comic industry had that and then pissed it away in order to make 400 different reskinned variants of the exact same character.
Number 4, there's no good reason any comic should have dozens of variant covers. That is the God's honest truth. The variant cover stuff, it's gotten insane. I liked it when DC Comics had an A cover and a B cover. The A cover was the primary cover, had the trade dress and everything. And the B cover was just a really cool piece of art that had no trade dress on it whatsoever, maybe minimal trade dress. So if you wanted to appreciate the art or whatever, like that was a cool alternative. They've gone so far over the line. Everything has so many variant covers. When they relaunched Iron Man with Dan Slott, I think they had 43 different covers. A different cover for every single armor that he'd ever had at that point. It is so out of control, it's not even fun.
Well, same time, Dan Slott's Fantastic Four had 73 covers. So, look, this has been an ongoing problem. And there's those of us that have been screaming about it for a very long time that variant covers have only really appeal to one market, and that's a speculatory collector and completist market. You already ran people like me out of the completist area by having ratio variants that are so high that they become unattainable from the get-go. And you also have now you're now at the point of like 73 times dipping. I don't even know what the hell that term would be for the completists on other books. Yeah, it is the worst excesses of the 1990s was Gen 13 with 13 covers, and that was considered egregious by the time you got to the early 2000s. Now that's considered perfectly normal for like She-Hulk number 3, which is not a book that anybody has any real desire for. So yeah, variant covers have been blown entirely out of water to the point where they are so not unique that they have absolutely no demand at this point, and the demand is shrinking, but it's their only marketing plan.
Coming in at number 3, they say fans miss a world that wasn't quite so Batman-centric. And I do agree with this one as well. The only thing that really sells for DC Comics is Batman these days. And I think it kind of ruins the need for Batman in the DC universe. Traditionally, and it hasn't been that way in a while, but DC Comics are a more hopeful universe. Obviously, the beacon of hope is Superman. And Batman was like the juxtaposition. It was a different point of view of the universe. And yes, you could do more interesting things with the character because he is darker. He is grittier. You can do some things with Batman that were really exciting because you can't really do them with a Superman. You can't really do them with Wonder Woman. You can't do them with Flash or Green Lantern. So Batman had a real unique void that he filled within the DC Comics universe. But now everything revolves around Batman, and everything has gotten more dark like he is. And he's kind of lost that uniqueness within the DC universe. And it just feels like everything has been infected by Gotham. And I like Gotham, and I like Batman, and I like, Dick Grayson and stuff like that. But there's so many Batman-related heroes now, it's not even funny. And then all the other heroes have lost what made them special to be more like Batman.
Absolutely. Look, I like Batman, but you don't need like half of your lineup, when you're releasing 80 comics a month to be Batman related. I think that's absurd. And all you're doing is essentially cannibalizing your own audience, and you're driving away anybody that might have casually picked up a Batman comic, because you got to pick up everything to really understand what the hell's even going on. Not to mention the fact that it's basically saying, no, our universe is dark and bland, and that's the only thing that sells. So we're just going to give you more and more and more of it until, at this point, I mean, I understand that your name is DC and it means Detective Comics. But at the same time, you're really built upon Action Comics, and you need to have that light to juxtapose against the dark of Batman, and you've entirely lost that. It makes the universe feel small.
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of the other characters don't sell, because there's nothing really special about him anymore. Why would I go read somebody that's dark and gritty when I can go read Batman? No one's getting darker and grittier than that. Coming in at number 2, according to CBR, deconstruction stories have long outstayed their welcome. I acknowledge that Alan Moore is absolutely brilliant. Frank Miller has certainly done deconstruction back in the day, but they always did deconstruction to kind of reconstruct the character, or possibly to provide a different point of view on the world we're seeing. But we've seen that point of view so often that deconstruction isn't interesting anymore. It's not special. It's not a unique writing trope whatsoever. I mean, Tom King has destroyed his reputation trying to become Alan Moore. Christopher Cantwell has destroyed his reputation trying to become Tom King. Jason Aaron, all he does is deconstruction these days. I am so tired of the deconstruction of comic book heroes. It's not unique. It's not an interesting approach to comic book heroes anymore. I want to see traditional versions of the heroes. And maybe if we don't see any deconstruction for a decade, then it will be unique again.
Well, I mean, I know you and I spoke about this before, but look, when you deconstruct your heroes to such a degree and so frequently, they lose everything about themselves that is heroic and aspirational. And you are literally in the business of selling people that are larger than life, heroes that go above and beyond what a normal person can do. And all you've done is rip them down to the point where they're the shitty guy at the bar at this point. They're not even like the decent, wholesome guy in an ugly world. They're now just as terrible. And all you're doing is reading these.
Why should I be wondering, why can't Superman be the good guy I am?
Yes.
I should want to be like him.
Exactly. When most of the readers are now saying, wow, I'm a better person than the hero that I'm reading about. I mean, look, plus the fact that deconstructing things, I'm sorry to tell you, it takes very little skill, and you're in an industry right now that is severely lacking skill. It doesn't take a lot of effort to break other things. Any idiot with a hammer can do it, but it takes an actual craftsman, someone with skill, to build something, and none of the people there know how to build. They only know how to tear down. So what are they going to do? They're going to play to their strengths, which is having no strengths, which means destroy things.
Callous hack is one thing that I can do. It feels like that's what's happening, Doc.
Yeah, you could be anybody can be a hatchet man. Try to build something.
Number 1, and I agree with this one, I think this is the worst writing trope in comics. Too many comic events turn readers away. There are way too many comic book events. It's ridiculous. We have overlapping events, and sometimes at Marvel, we'll have 3 overlapping events. You'll have an X-Men event, an Avengers event, and like a Spider-Man crossover all going on at the same time. It's like, enough is enough. And they don't even have good ideas anymore. Axe Judgment Day was clearly an Eternal story arc for Kieran Gillen's Eternal series, turned into an event for no reason. They're doing long-term damage to the industry when people start checking out of events. They don't even want to check them out anymore because nothing feels special or important anymore.
Oh, exactly. I mean, look, first of all, new readers don't buy events. They just don't. Because you need to have a whole lot of backstory to understand what an event's going on, and you don't have it, so you're not going to buy it. The long-term readers are tired of their story. I mean, you look at that Sword book from Al Ewing that never even got a chance to tell a story.
By the 6th issue, it had 3 tie-ins to events.
Yeah, no, 4. There was 2 issues that actually stood by themselves. In I think 3 in the entire duration of its run. So no, when these books, none of them can tell their own story. All they're doing is just getting bounced from event to event. And you never have an idea that's actually big enough to justify an event. All it is them overhyping something that would have been a minor crossover in the 80s or 90s, and blowing.
The other problem, Doc, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to, is the events don't sell really on themselves anymore. So every single Marvel event has to feature Spider-Man somehow, and every single DC event has to feature Batman somehow.
Oh yeah, exactly. They just managed to. I mean, hell, they managed to make Hellfire Gala 2 somehow about fucking Spider-Man. How?
Axe Judgment Day, the Eternals, Avengers, X-Men crossover. We got the judgment of Peter Parker. It's like, why is this even in here?
Yes, exactly. So look, none of these, they don't, and the only thing that really sells on them at this point, because everybody knows how formulaic they are, that nothing actually ends up changing, and half the time it retcons itself by the time it's all done. The only thing that actually sells are ratio variants for it, and we already covered how ratio variants are ruining everything, and they're losing their appeal, and they're just not selling anymore. So nothing about doing events seems to be practical, and all you're doing is driving away people that would just want to read their one fucking comic in peace. And now, because it keeps getting dragged into events, they just say, you know what, I'm not even reading that anymore, and they stop giving you any money at all.
But I do have to tip the cap, Doc, to CBR. They got something right, almost all of it.
Exactly. Congratulate. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually agree with them. I mean, hey, even a broken clock's right twice a day. Recently,
Doc and I actually talked about another CBR list. It was the 10 worst things about Marvel Comics right now. Doc is the Marvel aficionado. If you want to hear us run it down, we didn't run all of them down, but we had a pretty good conversation talking about all the stuff they were saying there. Doc had some choice words. He was mad at me. We had a lot of fun. Double check the video out here, or there's a link in the video description.